Hey, this is Tom Stoller, creator of Long Distance, and you are listening to The Pull Bag.
Welcome to The Pull Bags Origins episodes. Join us as TFG1 Mike grills this week's guests on just how they got into reading comic books.
This town deserves a better class of criminal, and I'm gonna give it to them.
Hello and welcome to The Pull Bag. This is yet again another Origins episode, and it is October already. 2015's almost over, ladies and gentlemen. And The Pull Bag has had a few setbacks with my moving and everything else, and sadly we didn't get Supergirl September done. My plan was for us to do Supergirl September with Michael Bailey, the new 52 Supergirl series, and then over on Remote Control, the current new TV podcast for the GCRN, we were going to review the pilot for Supergirl on CBS. But sadly, that didn't happen. Michael may still come back and do the pilot episode for Supergirl, but I'm, of course, TFG and Mike, and this is an Origins episode, as I said. For those of you who don't know what the Origins episodes are, I basically get, friends, people I've known for years, or complete random Twitter strangers, to come on the show and talk about how they started, stopped, or are continuing reading comics, or, all that kind of stuff. And through my interview with the long-distance writer, Tom Zoller, yes, I said his name right, yay, his last name anyway.
Yes.
We have Jesse Jackson with us.
Hey, Mike, I am thrilled to be here talking comics. Though, throw me on the list of, I am a Kara Zor-El longtime fan. So if you need someone to talk Supergirl, I will be glad to join you.
It's not that I didn't, Michael and I were going to do that.
Yeah.
It's just because of, I'd been on a waiting list for this apartment.
Yes.
And all this crap happened, and I just couldn't get to record because at the time I was living with 3 other people. And
Don't you hate it when real world interferes with your podcasting or your being geek? Like, come on, dudes. Hey.
Don't get me wrong. I'm absolutely grateful for
Yes.
what my friends did and helped, moved in with me and helped me out after my mom died. Don't get me wrong.
Yes.
I'm super grateful for that. But I haven't on a regular, I'm one, and everyone that has known me for the last 7 years or so doing that, I've been doing podcasting, even though GCRN's only been online for 6.5 years.
Yes.
Everyone knows I'm a podcast machine. If I didn't need sleep or eating, I could do this. I could record 24 hours a day. I really could, because I just absolutely love doing it. In the last 5 or 6 months, it was a constant hassle to be able to schedule around, the guests and, my friends and whatever else, and then figuring out when the roommates are going to be home or when they're not going to be home, or blah, 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 blah. But anyway, we're here to talk comics.
Yes.
And the first question I usually ask is, was there a parent, a friend, a complete stranger that said, "Here, kid, here's a comic, go away, you bother me"?
So I just tweeted this, and so if someone is in their TARDIS and goes back to now, when did they say they recorded this? Because I don't know when you're going to release this. I just tweeted, I'm going to tell my grandmother's story. And
oh boy, looking at the schedule,
Yeah.
this may be a double episode week on the 7th of October, most likely.
So one of my earliest memories is my dad was in the Army, and we moved around a lot, and my mom would often go back to Rose Pine, Louisiana, which is just about an hour away from Fort Polk, Louisiana. And my grandmother was the manager of a post exchange, which is picture an on-base Target, okay? Where the different soldiers and the people, dependents of soldiers, could come by. The commissary is the grocery store, and the PX is kind of dry goods where you go pick up things. And she managed that. And I would get in her car. She would drive me to work. She'd go early, and I could go to the spinner rack, and I could pick every comic I wanted. I would go get a thing of Oreos or chocolate chip cookies and a thing of, milk, and I would go back to her office. She would rip the covers off the comics so that she could get credit. She would turn the covers back in to get credit. The statute of limitations is well over, right? And I would have...
I'm sorry, but no, the statute of limitations is never over.
So I have this pile...
Technically, she murdered comic books. That's murder in the first degree. Oh, my God.
So I had this pile of comic books without a cover, and for the longest time, none of my comics had covers. And I would go in the back of I'd go to the warehouse. I'd take these big boxes of, soap powder and kind of build a fort, and I would read comic books all day long. And so that is one of my earliest memories of comic books. And I read everything. I read, superhero comics. I read Archie comics. I read, the Casper and Wendy and Little Hot Stuff and Richie Rich. I mean, if it was a comic book, I read it. So I give my grandmother wonderful credit for her just push. She was glad that I was reading, and so she helped feed my habit.
Mm-hmm. What was the first comic you ever read? Do you remember?
No, I cannot. And I always admire people like JLA 1780, or man, I know it must have been a Superman or Superboy book. As long as I can remember, I loved the Legion of Superheroes, and I can remember those, all those arts back when Jim Shooter was writing it and such. I can remember, they had a Captain Action comic book when I was in the 3rd or 4th grade, and it had nothing to do with my Captain America action figure, but I remember reading this comic book of Captain Action that was so cool. But no, I can't remember my first comic book whatsoever. It has always been comic books. In fact, when I was on the 5th or 6th grade, I remember this, and I'm sure before my dad passed, if I had asked him this, he would have never remembered. But we were living in Fort Knox, Kentucky at the time, and we went to Mammoth Cave, which is this beautiful, massive cave, national park, and we went on a tour, and when we came back, my dad was telling my mom about some of the souvenirs that the people bought, and she said, well, what did Jesse Wayne buy? Because in my house, I'm Jesse Wayne, one word. My dad is Jesse and I'm Jesse Wayne. And he said, a GD comic book. Except say GD. So it just, as long as I can remember, and they didn't understand that I could rip through a comic book very quickly. It's like, we just bought you a couple of comic books. How can you already be done with them?
Some are very fast reads,
yes,
but yeah, no. I've been here in Kentucky for 22 years or something like that.
I did not know you would.
Yeah. So, yeah, Mammoth. I went to Mammoth once or twice.
So, what part of Kentucky are you in?
I'm in Louisville.
Oh, okay.
The actual city, not out in the boonies. Thank God.
Heart of Bourbon Country.
Do what?
Part of Bourbon Country.
Yeah, part of, yes. So, okay, as a kid, what comics did you gravitate towards? Was it superheroes? Was it Archie? Was it Transformers or anything like that? What was it when you were a kid?
Yeah, it was always. So I'm older than dirt. I graduated high school in 1977. So, in fact, one of the traumatic moments in my life, and this is when I first understood inflation, is when I first started buying comic books when my grandmother wasn't, mutilating them and giving them is my parents could give you a quarter and you could buy 2 comic books because they were 12 cents each. And when they went to 15 cents, I could only buy 1. My buying power was cut in half. And, in my mind, I didn't care about the dime. I just know I used to be able to get 2 comic books. Now I only can get 1 comic book. It's always been superheroes for me. It has always been, Batman, Superman, loved Jimmy Olsen, Lois Lane. When I'd get those 25-cent giants that had only one new story, but in the back were all these golden age stories, I just loved it. So yes, it's always been superhero stories.
Awesome. Was there ever a point between high school, college, whatever, later in life as you grew older, did you ever grow out of it, or did you ever stop reading comics?
So I'm so glad you asked me this. You are unfortunately or fortunately, depending on your perspective, you are hitting the highlights. My mom, just hated comic books. And mostly because of the mess, just where do you store them and what do you do? And there weren't long boxes back then. You just had them piled up, and she always felt like it was a waste of money. And she was a little bit better at if I bought books, paperbacks and things like that. So when I started in high school, junior high school, did not have access to comics very easily and just quit buying them because they just weren't there. They weren't really accessible. And I remember junior, senior year, I got there was a flash where, Barry Allen had to change his face. Where he didn't look, he had this dark hair because there was this trial thing, and I started picking up a few things about that. But when I moved out of the house, and before I got married, there was this time period where I could buy as many comic books as I wanted. I no longer lived at home where my mom was telling me I shouldn't be wasting my money on comic books, and I wasn't married yet. Your wife is like, no, you can't buy comics. We need to pay the electric bill. So for that 3 or 4 years, it was, I can pay the electric bill next week. I need to get comics. And so I went through, and there was not a local comic shop in Lake Charles, Louisiana. You would go to Pappy's, which is a convenience store, and you'd go to the spinner rack and you'd try to pick out the comics that I don't have this one. I don't have this one. I need this one. And then you'd go to like a mini mart and go through, there'd be 2 or 3 convenience stores you'd have to go through to try to get them all.
Right.
And then there was a guy who had Bookworm's Apple, which was a record store in the local, paraphernalia head shop where they would sell stuff. And he, Chester, is the comic book guy. Picture the Simpsons comic book guy, and that was Chester. He owned the record store, and he
life well spent.
Yeah. And comics. And so what he did is he was driving like 60 miles to Beaumont, Texas, to pick up his comics. And he said, well, if I start selling comics at the store, even if I don't make any money, at least I don't have to drive. I can get it myself. So he started selling. And all of a sudden, this is the time where First Comics was doing John Sable. And the EM2 and there was Mage, and so these comics that were not on the newsstand, they were comic shop only, I was getting for the first time. And so all of a sudden, now he didn't have a pool bag, he just had the comics, and so you'd have to walk down the aisle like, oh yeah, this one, and that's when I had fed my habit, just full force at this point.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. You move out of your parents' house, and then, oh crap, I'm getting married. Yikes.
So I had a closet filled with comics, just tons of comics, and I took them to a used bookstore, and I said, I want to sell them. And they said, well, all we can give you is like 10 cents a book or something. I said, that's fine. And I sold all my comics, my Teen Titans, my Legion of Superheroes, my Supermans, and all these books, and got enough money for the down payment for my wife's engagement ring. And I always joke that I don't know if she was happier that I got rid of all the comics or that she got an engagement ring.
Wow. That's crazy.
Thank you.
All right. So after you're married, as you're getting older, where did you jump back in, and how did your interest reemerge itself?
So I continued to buy comics, and we, even when we were struggling, we had in '89 we had our only child, and like all young married couples, we struggled money wise, but we always found money for comics, and kind of started going and buying stuff. And I remember being so involved with this is certainly before Chris was born, but when John Byrne took over Superman, and I was so excited that he was getting comic books were getting mainstream publicity about him doing, and then certainly The Dark Knight and Watchmen,
Death of,
yes, and all these different Batman Year One and all these different things, and I started, I'd grown up in a really small town, and so had really never gone to many conventions. And then living in Dallas, all of a sudden you started getting a little more access to conventions. And Keith's Comics, which is still my comic shop of choice, would have different people come in. And Jeff Smith came in when Bone had only been 2 or 3 issues in there, and he said, it's Bugs Bunny meets Lord of the Rings. And I'm like, oh, that sounds fun. And Terry Moore was just finishing the first Strangers in Paradise, miniseries. And I was talking to him, and I said that I was, at the time I was buying a lot of Marvel, buying a lot of DC, and Mike, I'm a pretty easygoing guy, but every once in a while when I'm done, I'm done. And so it was Secret Wars 2, and the Beyonder had been at our world, and the whole issue of Spider-Man was Peter Parker holding a steno pad that had been turned gold and debating on whether he should sell it to pay for Aunt May's medical treatment. And I'm going, okay, you aren't spending it on hookers and blow. Why is this even a debate? And I quit reading Spider-Man after that issue. And I did not go back till J. Michael Straczynski started writing it, because I'm a huge Babylon 5 fan. Stuck with the whole time, and then they did the whole where
One More Day.
Yeah, where they, him and Mary Jane weren't married anymore, and and all this stuff, and I went, okay, I'm done again. So So yeah, that's where I get to, and I started getting to more and more, and now I'm going to sound like the music guy, right? Like, oh, I don't like popular bands. I just like the indies. But I really did started finding that the independent books, and not because they were independent, but because it seemed like it tell a story. There would be a beginning, a middle, and an end. Versus, I love Clark Kent, I love Superman, but that story can't end because it's the machine that pushes money. So you're gonna you just got to keep that going. And how can the character really change? What's the arc you're gonna show? And
throw him in jeans and a sweatshirt, or put him in black and silver armor, or hell hath no fury like Nicolas Cage in Superman Lives. I mean,
And you haven't gotten to me this yet, but so when they did the New 52, I looked at myself and I said, do I really want to go through another reboot? And I did. I went cold turkey. I quit buying. I bought the Starman. I mean, it wasn't Starman. It was. Why am I drawing a blank on the guy from Starman, the villain? That was Jane Robinson wrote the book. Anyway, I read his because I love James Robinson's Starman. But I didn't buy hardly any books, and I still don't. I do not buy. I just said I don't care anymore. It is. Go ahead.
See, that's the funny thing is for me, and 3 years of the pull bag, everybody knows my story by now, but for me, it was the Joker. My buddy Steve, who created the network with me, Steve Megatron, he got Batman 13 at the time. And it was like, oh my God, the Joker's back and he wants his face. Why doesn't he call Optimus Prime or something?
Yeah.
And I read Steve's written review and I'm like, okay, I like the Joker. I can kind of hear Mark Hamill's voice coming out of Scott Snyder's writing.
Right.
That's fine. I'll check it out. So I jumped in, and after reading 13, I jumped in and in and in. I ended up in Nightwing's shoes. I ended up in Batgirl's boots. I ended up in all the characters that I grew up loving with the DC animated universe for the most part. And it was all well and good. Everything was going great. And then Forever Fucking Evil had to happen.
Yes.
Where they essentially killed and revived Dick Grayson only to turn him into the Nick Fury of the DC universe without the eye patch. Oh my God.
See, so during the early 90s, I discovered comic book fandom. And I started writing letters. I won a Baldy once. I was so happy. And I joined a Titan Talk APA. And for those of you who may not remember, it was an amateur press association, and you would write fan fiction, or you would comment on other people's fiction, do reviews of comic books, and you would make 45 copies of your contribution, mail it to a central mailer. They would all put it together and take your 45 copies with everyone else's contributions, put them all together, and then mail it back to you, and you would have a fanzine, where it had people's fiction and fan artwork, and comments and critique of the previous issue's stories. And I'd gotten to be a lot of friends, and I loved the Teen Titans, and Dick Grayson was my favorite character. I loved Robin. I loved when he became Nightwing. The original story that it was kind of a tribute to Superman, who he felt like was an uncle, because back then, right, that when Batman and Superman didn't hate each other, and that's 2 or 3 reboots ago, and so I feel guilty every once in a while that I don't buy Grayson or Dick Grayson's book because I support the character.
Don't.
But we're talking about this. I don't like to hate watch TV shows, and I don't like to hate read books. And if I'm not enjoying the story, I just quit. And especially when, part of my loyalty was into the comic shop, right? I'm like, God, if I quit buying this comic, that's less revenue they're going to get. And,
But then you find so many other comics that you can buy from them.
Yes. And that's exactly it. And, and not to give, Tom Zoller, more love than you've already given him, right? But, Long Distance has not a shred of superhero or, comic book, quote unquote references.
Well, it does. I mean, they reference certain things like TV shows and stuff like that, but it's not like with Tom Zoller and his 2 series that I know of with Love and Capes and Long Distance. They are 2 totally different things, obviously.
And he wanted to that. And, I was kind of lucky enough. I found the email last week. I sent it to him where he said, I'm thinking about doing this book that's, about a couple and he's got powers and it's kind of like Lois and Clark without the sucky parts and kind of talked about. So I was there from the beginning and I love Loving Capes and I was so proud of Long Distance because I think he pushed some other muscles creatively and and did it. But if you, and I've seen this from other people, if you want to read a good Superman and Lois story, go get Love and Capes, and you get your stuff.
I don't see it as Superman and Lois.
What do you see it as?
The Incredibles.
I can see that.
I mean, come on. I mean, Mark essentially is Mr. Incredible. Darkblade is Frozone. I mean, yeah, sure, Abby doesn't have any powers, but the whole thing. Because I've only read the first volume, I haven't been able to get the other 3 volumes yet. I want to, but it's anyway. So I finally finished reading the first volume, and it's just so amazing. It's just so. It's not as amazing as Long Distance, but it's still amazing.
It is so. There is. And he set himself up every, 4 panels as a joke, and it is, and somehow he able to build the story and do the humor. Now I see totally your Incredibles, but I just see this as, the Silver Age Batman and Superman, Crusader, and the Justice League, and and he told the story, right? Amazonia was supposed to not be in the rest of the books, but she was so popular that he brought her in and did stuff. So yes, but exactly, going back, there is so much, you can find, such amazing stories, and it's out there. And, like I just found Rat Queens, which is sass and saucery. And I'm like, this is so funny. And it's so interesting. And, Lock and Key. And so there's a lot of fun that are still telling you a good story.
Absolutely.
That's not necessarily...
See, my biggest problem, with Marvel is that I feel lost in Marvel.
Right.
Even before they did Marvel Now, or all new Marvel, when they did Marvel Now and they did whatever reboot to get number 1s again or whatever else. Yeah, I want to go back and read all the Iron Man trades that they did in 2012, 2013, whatever, because ever since Robert Downey Jr., I kind of like Iron Man now, that kind of thing. The Spider-Man thing, I'm so spoiled by John Semper Jr.'s 94 Spider-Man cartoon. I've seen every single story anyone can ever do with Spidey and any of his villains. I did not need to read, 100 of the 700 issues of Spider-Man just to get, oh, this plot from the Sinister Six, or this plot from the Vulture. So with Spider-Man, I jumped on at 698 to 700.
Okay.
And then I went into Superior Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
A Superior Spider-Man is kind of, but not really, what they did with Grayson.
Yeah.
It's taking Doc Ock and putting him in Spider-Man's body, and we're exploring how Otto would deal with being a superhero. That was awesome and interesting to me. And then, oh, guess what? Hey, we have the unamazing Spider-Man 2 coming out. So guess what? We're going to revive Peter Parker from the dead and blah. Like, this is why I don't like the Marvel stuff when it comes to superheroes anymore, because it's either I don't want to see just another random story, a random villain of the week story with any of the main characters, and I don't want to see just so many flip-flops. And right now, the only books that I will read that are Marvel-based are the Star Wars stuff.
Yeah.
Most of it. Princess Leia kind of fell off for me, but
I read Mark Waid's, Princess Leia shorts, miniseries, and I liked it. I get that, and I'm someone who went through, when Superman died, and they actually, this was back when they used to have to put the little triangle on the titles, so that you could read them in the correct order, because all the books were connected, and you had the 4, replacement Supermen, and, when Kal-El came back, and he had the long hair, and, I felt like there was an arc, and they were trying to tell something.
Mm-hmm.
But for the longest time, Barry Allen was the only, hero that never came back. He came back. Kara Zor-El, I remember crying in Crisis when, Superman's holding her, and I remember the Brainiac 5, the Legion issue with him mourning her, and, they kind of retcon that he's always known she was going to die, even though, he had a crush on her, and they kind of talked about that, in the books. And now then it's like, okay. And if you go to the well too many times, and it's a classic statement, and it's true, everyone's book is someone's first book. And
right.
And I applaud, if you're any age, but I'm going to say, in your teens or your 20s, and you're loving these stories, great. I'm glad for you, because I remember with my teens, I don't even remember the title, but there was the when Peter Parker had the extra arms, back in that, and I'm like, holy moly! And then of course I couldn't find the next issue because there wasn't a distribution that was first. I was in Germany. My dad was stationed over there, and I remember getting that and going, "Oh God, I gotta find the next issue. I gotta find the next issue. What happened?" So.
You sound just like Daffy Duck.
Yeah.
In Ghostbusters.
Yes.
But okay, so that's my problem with Marvel. My problem with DC is they started something with the New 52. They gave me a dark. People say the Gail Simone run of Batgirl is super dark, but there's a lot of comedy in the Gail Simone writing for Batgirl.
Yeah.
There really is. Yeah, the visuals are dark, and but it's friggin' Gotham. It's supposed to be dark.
Right.
I mean, but there's a lot of funny stuff in Gail's run. So I started with that, and then obviously Nightwing, and I'm a huge, like I already said, DC Animated Universe, Batman the Animated Series, Superman the Animated Series, Justice League, Batman Beyond, all that stuff, except for Teen Titans. That's not in continuity at all.
Yeah.
Raven even told me so, that it's not in continuity.
Well, and I am glad for George and Marv that's been incredibly successful for them, financially. But no, it hasn't it hasn't clicked with me. But my son is now 26, and he was a youngster when the animated series was first out, and we would watch them together. And, that's as good a Batman as you're ever going to get. The Gray Ghost, I still choke up when they had Adam West doing that voice, and when Bruce Wayne says the Gray Ghost was my hero, and he still is. I'm getting choked right now,
Well, for me, it's like, I look at some of the comedy bits in Batman the Animated Series and Superman the Animated Series, like, World's Finest was groundbreaking.
Yes.
That 3-parter that eventually turned into it, they cobbled it together into a movie.
Right.
And, the one line that always creeps into my head is, "Where's Superman? He's out at sea, never around when you need him." And it's Kevin Conroy, and it's Tim Daly, and it's Dana Delaney, and it's Lauren Lester. It's all those people. And Ephraim Zimbalist. It's all those people that made what Bruce Timm and his team did for nearly, let's see, technically JLU ended in 2004, so almost 12 years between 92 to 2004.
Right.
I mean,
So I've had a crush on Dana Delaney since China Beach. And I loved her, in Mask of the Phantasm and all her. I mean, I remember going to see Mask of the Phantasm in an almost empty theater, and I loved her, and I just, there is so much goodness about those series, and Adrienne Barbeau is Catwoman, and it just, and you're right. I mean, to many people, and I'm going to raise my hand, Kevin Conroy is Batman.
I have him saying it himself. Yeah. This is Kevin Conroy, and I am the goddamn Batman. Yeah. I mean, when I interviewed him in 2012, I'm thinking to myself, what can I get away with asking him to say that he'll actually? Because you know how some voice actors are. Some, and I'm not throwing any of them under the bus.
Absolutely.
Certain people just won't. But Kevin is amazing. But with comics and with DC, like I was saying earlier, so Batgirl brought me in, and I was like, okay, cool, I'm DC. This is who I'm gonna be: Batgirl, Nightwing, Batman every now and then. Because let's face it, in my personal opinion, Death of the Family was very sadly anticlimactic at the end of it. So I'm like, all right, cool, great. And then they're like, well, guess what? We're going to reboot again. And guess what we're going to do? We're going to kill your favorite character. What pisses me off so much about the DC thing with Dick Grayson and
Tell me, Mike, share. We're all here for you.
Is that they, and I've said this many times before, they never let Kyle Higgins write the story he was going to write. With Death of the Family, he was originally going to have Dick be based in Gotham still and have Amusement Miles, so he'd have his own circus, so that aspect of the Dick Grayson, origin stays true. Oh no, guess what? The Joker's going to come in and fuck everything up.
Yeah.
And okay, then I'm going to take him to my hometown of Chicago. Forget Bloodhaven. We don't need that city. Let's go to Chicago, the best city on earth or whatever, And they spent, what was it, 20 to 29 in Chicago, and I'm like, yes, do more of this. Let's find out. Oh, guess what? No. Lex Luthor's going to kill him, bring him back to life, and then he's going to become the Nick Fury, the DC. It just, God. So after that happened, I needed to go elsewhere.
Right.
I essentially said, and we are an explicit podcast here, so I'm just going to go ahead and say, I essentially said, fuck DC and Marvel, because I just was so jaded with Batgirl changing completely, and with Nightwing going off and being the character, quote unquote, character of Nightwing going off and being dead, and Grayson going on to be a super. I was like, I don't care what else is out there. And then I found Transformers, I found Turtles over at IDW, I found all this cool stuff at Image, I found all the, I found, Xenoscope with their Grim Fairy Tale stuff, and I'm like, there's so much choice in comics. You don't have to be
Yeah.
limited to
No.
just superheroes or just like for me at this point, it's franchises. It really, really is. Gem and the Holograms, Transformers, like I said, Turtles, all that stuff.
I recommend you try Rachel Rising from Terry Moore. He's the same guy who did Strangers in Paradise. That's a horror book, and Echo is a kind of science fiction book he has. Echo is already finished. You can buy that in one trade paperback, and it's a really interesting action-adventure kind of book. I'm a big Terry Moore fan. I obviously love Strangers in Paradise, but that's an epic love story. I'm right there with you, and don't get me wrong, right? Like on Southgate Media, I did a Daredevil fan, podcast, and we watched 2 episodes at a time, and I absolutely loved their take on Daredevil, and I can't wait to see Jessica Jones. I still read Powers. I like that gritty, take, and it's a different side. I think there's an interesting story going on there. I was there at Ant-Man. I'm going to be there at all the, when they have the superhero movies.
I'll be at the superhero movies, but I can't. There's certain superhero, like I want to give the Supergirl series from New 52 an honest try, and I have read the first trade, Last Daughter of Krypton. So, and I have all the other ones for the most part, so I just haven't been so busy, I haven't gotten around to, but, I want to give that an honest try and, whatever, but it's just with the characters that I absolutely love, DC essentially ruined them for me.
Yes, I know that feeling.
Between Batgirl and Nightwing.
Yeah.
But now it's like, it's opened, like, if you'd have told me 2 years ago that I would have read Long Distance or Love and Capes or, any Transformers comic, honestly, because 2 years ago, I just wasn't even, well, maybe more than 2, but I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, at this point, I am more into anything that relates to my childhood than whatever current politically correct storyline the big two have to do. And not even politically correct, company correct. Let's call it that. Company correct. Oh my God, we have a movie coming out. Like I already said with the Peter Parker thing or whatever. It's like, just no.
I hear you.
When they did the Lois and Clark, the new series, so isn't there a new series titled Lois and Clark?
On TV, I don't think so.
No. Comic.
I don't know.
Comic.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not looking at any information. I'm just sitting here talking.
Sure.
So, I believe there is it might be a mini-series thing that DC is doing. I don't know, because I know the Batmite series that they're doing is a 6-issue mini-series. There's a series right now called Lois and Clark. And I really thought it was going to be something to the effects of what the Dean Cain, Terry Hatcher series was.
Right.
And apparently it's not. Because I know a lot of people give Lois and Clark, the TV series, a crap ton of grief.
Yeah.
That series was awesome.
Well, sure it was. And Dean Cain was a great Superman. And Terry Hatcher was a fun Lois. And so, and we are spoiled now. I'm going to sound like an old fart now. But we are spoiled with how much good comic book TV we're getting.
Oh God!
I mean,
yes.
and I'm not here if you have a problem with this, but overall, Arrow is pushing things as much as they can. Flash, giving it. We had Constantine. We're now going to get Supergirl. There's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. We've Agent Carter. There are so many, and they aren't campy, and nothing's wrong with camp. I love that too. I loved Batman back then, and I loved the Tick when it was on, the live action Tick, right? But they're trying to tell good stories, set in these universes, and it's a golden age for comic book fans.
It really
Yeah.
is. I mean, television today is, now I know a lot of people were, myself included, we were hit or miss on Gotham season 1, but let's face it, Gotham season 1 was really trying to find its feet.
It was, and I love Donald Logue. I loved him in Terriers, and he's perfect at Bullock. A couple episodes in the second season, they seem to have found a little something, right?
Yeah, it's doing a hell of a lot better. I will say this, and I don't condone anyone do this, but I will say this: when that mysterious CBS hack or leak or whatever happened way back when, this summer, and oh my God, a high quality version of the Supergirl pilot ended up being online for people to find. I have it, I couldn't resist, and I've seen the full pilot episode of the series, and I'm telling you, man, it's going to be CBS's superhero show, because it's gonna be. It's on the same level, but it's more super heroic than Lois and Clark was. It's on the same level of goodness as Lois and Clark.
That's great.
But it's more of dealing with obviously it's Kara, because it's Supergirl. It's not, My only wish, and I know this will never happen, because I know the news a few months ago was fake. And I know he'll probably never do it, even though he's not doing anything right now. In the pilot, they say Superman's name. This isn't a spoiler. They say his name so many damn times. By the time everybody finished watching the pilot, they're like, can they just show him and stop saying his name already? First of all, and this isn't a spoiler either because it was in the news, you got Dean Cain as her dad, and you've got Helen Slater as her mom, as her Earth parents.
Yes, and I saw that, and I said, oh, okay, they're getting it, right?
Yeah.
This is so much goodness.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So with this series, they keep mentioning Superman. They keep mentioning the cousin. They don't actually say it by name, but they say him, and they say this, and they say that, whatever else. They're playing the pronoun game, essentially.
Right.
My one wish, and I know this will probably never happen, is that Welling shows up in the suit. I know it'll never happen. Right. I know it's wishful thinking, but just... So you got Supergirl coming from CBS. Flash and Arrow Season 3, I need to wait until it hits Netflix to watch again, because Arrow Season 3 essentially made me say, screw this show.
Yeah.
It was too much Batman influence. It was just too damn dark for... Don't get me wrong, I love dark shows. I really do. Yeah. But Arrow's turn just went too dark. And I think now looking back on it, he needed to do that dark turn to what the lightness that's going to happen in Season 4.
Right.
The Flash, oh God.
Yeah.
The Flash is just hitting it on all cylinders. Absolutely love that show.
Absolutely.
So pulling it back around to comics, okay. What currently are you reading? What currently are you getting from your comic shop?
So I'm getting, I went through Fables in the trade paperback. So I just finished reading it. I still read Daredevil because I like the character, and I'm a big Mark Waid fan. So I buy Daredevil. I get the Doctor Who comics because I do a Doctor Who podcast and I want to see how they're doing. I do get... I just finished getting Long Distance. I get Astro City. I think Astro City still gives me my, cape fix. Is well done. Powers. I still do, I'm watching Rachel Rising, which is the horror book from Terry Moore. And then I will, every once in a while, I'll hear that something's good and I'll try it out. I love Saga, and, so a little bit more of the independence, and so I don't go too outlandish, but still, a fair amount of superhero books and some other stuff. So yeah, I still keep my hand in, so to speak.
Were you ever a Turtles fan at all, or no? Because I know you're slightly beyond the audience.
Yeah, my son loved the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as a kid, the cartoon show. Mm-hmm. He was born in '89, so like in the '90s. Yeah. I loved the concept of the Turtles more than the actual books. And so yeah, I've never kind of read the books, or I've seen certainly enough of the cartoons, and during the '90s, the live actions, I took my son to, and he had a Donatella stuffed doll that I bought because it had the LSU colors on it. It was purple and gold, and so we're originally from Louisiana, and so just a casual fan.
I'll say this: if I know a lot of people would recommend the old stuff, but if it didn't really hit you back then, give the IDW series a try from the first issue, because it completely. I've been reviewing that series for the past year and a half, almost 2 years now, and the series has been going on for 4 years.
Okay.
It's a complete love letter to every aspect of TMNT.
Okay.
It has stuff in it that you just like. For me, I remember when I first picked it up, and I know people are sick of hearing the story, but anyway, when I first picked up the very first trade, and I opened it up, and I'm like, oh no! As much as I love Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, I do not want all red Eastman and Laird turtles, all red bandana turtles for this entire series. My buddy Joe, who does the podcast with me that we review the series, he's like, no, it's okay. Just go with it. Keep an open mind. You'll be all right. And the reasoning for why they did that and how the color codes come in later. Oh, okay. God, it's just so good. Everything about that series is so good.
I will have to check it out.
Another one, if you're interested, you can check out Kyle Higgins' run on Batman Beyond. It's called either Batman Beyond 2.0 or Batman Beyond Universe.
Okay.
That was a really good run.
Okay.
That was pretty awesome. So, all right. I think that's going to wrap it up.
So you didn't ask, but it's very clear from my answer. It was DC, right?
Yeah. I forgot to ask the most important question.
Yes.
Marvel, DC, or any other company, and obviously it's DC.
Yeah, it was DC growing up. It always was. In fact, I was making a presentation at a conference, and they had me write an introduction. Mm-hmm. And I said, Superman over Batman, Star Trek over Star Wars, DC over Marvel. And the guy reading it looked at me like, you really want me to read this? Yes, I'm proud of my cred. Of course I do. So.
I don't know. I think I'd have to do the reverse of Leonard. Next Generation over original series, and obviously Picard over Kirk.
I hear you. And there's an interesting discussion to have. I certainly think Patrick Stewart is a better actor than Shatner, but there is something about that original series that they took a lot of risks and they told some great stories, and there is something about Shatner's Kirk that is something pretty interesting. So yeah, and don't get me wrong, I'm going to be like everyone else at the new Star Wars movie, and I'm excited about seeing it, but it's Trek over Star Wars for me.
The whole thing with Star Wars, I've seen a few news stories that potentially a certain actor from the prequels will be joining Episode 8, and why he's dead. is he going to be a Force ghost throughout the entire damn movie?
Mm-hmm.
That makes absolutely zero sense to me whatsoever. So anyway, Thank you for joining us here in the Pull Bag. That's going to do it for this episode of The Origins. You're also going to hear later on today, you can hear the Gem and the Holograms Outrageous Annual #1 review. So that's what's going to go on there. Jesse, where can the people find you online, sir?
So I just want to thank you, Mike. This was a blast. I thank you for having me on the show. I love talking comics. It is my first best love. And so this is a great show, and I appreciate you having me on. I am at Jesse Jackson DFW on Twitter. I do a couple of...
he said doo-doo.
Yeah. And if you follow me on Twitter, every once in a while you'll see that someone throws political stuff my way, because with a name like Jesse Jackson... And I always have to reply, no, I'm the Jesse Jackson obsessed with, Doctor Who and Bruce Springsteen. I did do it again. I am a co-host of Next Stop Everywhere, a podcast all about Doctor Who. I do Storming the Castle, a podcast all about ABC show Castle, and I'm grumpy about the way the new season's going, but we're trying to get past that. And my latest podcast is at Set Lusting Bruce. It is a podcast, much to Mike's surprise, about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and his fans. And so I'm kind of all over the board on podcasting.
Cool. You can find us on Twitter at The Pullbag, also at GeekCast Radio. I am at TFG and Mike on Twitter. What else? Yeah, I think that's going to do it for this episode of The Pullbag. And make your great escape into comics, and we will catch you next time.
Lois, I'm home. I had a train derailment in Canada, an orphanage fire in London, and a dam broke in India. Did you make something for dinner? Oh, my gosh! What happened?
Lex Luthor.
The rat.
Where's Lois?
She was here just a second ago.
Probably scared witless, poor thing.
Don't worry. I'll have you out of that thing in no time. Okay, let's see now. Do I disconnect the black wire or the white one?
Don't worry, I'll save you. What do you think?
Oh,
What do I think? Lois, I think you got some splaining to do.
Clarky, if we're going to be partners and we're going to be married, I want to be part of the act.
Lois, there are things I do you can do. Me, Superman.
Me, super wife.
us super in trouble. Could you hold this argument till later and get us out of here?
I knew this was going to happen. First you know who I am, then you want to fire me, next thing you're going to find yourself in the heck.
Uh-oh. Wee.
Ay, caramba! You exploded them.
Oh, Clarky. Well, I can explain why they exploded.
Ay, ay, ay. Hola.
You've just heard the latest episode of The Pull Bag, the GCRN's comic review and discussion podcast. There are several ways to get in touch with us and leave feedback for the show. You can visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can comment on the episode and all of our different podcasts. You can rate our show on iTunes. Be sure to leave us feedback. Call the voicemail line, 502-526-5821. Please remember to tell us the show you are leaving the message for, and your name. Become a fan of us on Facebook by searching GeekCast Radio Network. Send us an email feedback at geekcastradio.com. Follow us on Twitter at GeekCastRadio. So until next time, make your great escape into comics and unleash the geek in you.